Josh, how you doing, man?
I'm blessed, man. Good to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited. Today we are talking about the weapon of waiting, and our passage comes from Psalm 62, where it says, "I wait quietly before God, for my victory comes from Him. He alone is my rock and my salvation, my fortress where I will never be shaken." So many enemies against one man, all of them trying to kill me. To them, I'm just a broken down wall or a tottering fence. They plan to topple me for my high position. They delight in telling lies about me. They praise me to my face, but curse me in their hearts. Let all that I am wait quietly before God, for my hope is in Him. He alone is my rock and my salvation, my fortress where I will not be shaken. My victory and honor come from God alone. He is my refuge, a rock where no enemy can reach me. O my people, trust in Him at all times. Pour out your heart to Him, for God is our refuge. And I'm going to be honest. As I read that, and whenever we got the topic of today
Yes.
and everything, I saw the weapon of waiting, and I'm not going to lie, I was a little like, oh man,
Yeah.
like
Could we got
whenever
it?
you talk about waiting, whenever you talk about like, couldn't we have gotten encouragement
Yeah,
or
like
favor,
favor, yeah.
or, and so whenever we talk about waiting, I think oftentimes we can think of it in such a negative light. There was a study that was actually done recently, and it said that 5 years of our lives are going to be in waiting in lines. 5 years. We're going to spend 5 years of our lives waiting in lines. And whenever I think about that, whenever I think about waiting, I think, man, what a waste. And honestly, as I read this passage, and when I think about, just as we're in this walk of life and as we're living our life for the Lord, there is nothing more that the enemy would want to do than to allow 5 years of our lives to go to waste in the waiting. And so, man, how do we, if we're going to utilize these 5 years, how do we become effective in the waiting times?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it really starts with resting. And not doing nothing, but resting. Think about those 2 times when King David says, he said he waits quietly before the Lord. And in that word, waiting quietly, the Hebrew word translates it as rest. And so it's not waiting, it's resting in Him. And I wonder, how is he able to rest with all this chaos, all this going on with his son, everything going on around him? And I think it's for 2 reasons. One, I think it's that he knows when he is waiting, God is still working.
Yeah.
I think about even for us or anybody working, they tell you when you go home, leave work at work and then rest, right? And that's hard to do, even though we try to, but there's things in our minds, I got to do this, I got to get this done tomorrow. And so it's hard to really leave work at home.
Yeah.
But I imagine, what if there was someone else, let's say a clone of myself, at work while I'm at home, doing the things I need to do, getting the work still done.
Right.
If that was going on, I could actually rest because I know the work's still happening.
Right.
And so I think for David and even for us, we have to realize that while we are resting in God, it's not that nothing's happening. He's still working on our behalf.
Right.
And He's not a clone of us. He works way better than we ever could.
Right. Yeah.
And so I think for David, it's not only am I resting, but I'm resting and things are still happening. I might be in a place of peace, but God is still working. God is still moving. And I think that's huge.
Yeah. So to me, in whenever I think about waiting, whenever I think about resting in who God is, it seems to be, it comes down to trust, the level of trust that we have in God. And so I think whenever I think about waiting, I almost equate it to doing nothing.
Yep.
When that's not even the case. Biblically, that's not the case. Whenever David is saying he waits quietly before God, he is resting and trusting and having faith that God's going to fight this battle for him, that he's going to allow him to fight this battle. And I think it really just comes down to control. It's hard for us to wait on the Lord. It's hard for us to rest in the Lord because that means we're giving up control of our circumstances, of our position, of the things that are going on in our lives. And it can be really difficult because the things that we're waiting on for God, the things that we want control over are big things, right? Maybe it's a healing, maybe it's Maybe it's a financial circumstance. Maybe it's a loved one who is, lost, and we're wanting them, waiting for them to come home. And sometimes it can be so hard for us to just rest in the fact that God is who He says that He is.
Yeah.
And I think really it whether it be waiting on the healing, whether it be waiting on the financial blessing, whether it be waiting on the family member to come home, I think if we got a perspective of waiting and utilizing the waiting periods as a weapon against the enemy, I think it would transform our whole entire spiritual life. I think it would transform the heart from which and the posture that we have in those waiting times, and the waiting then becomes more productive in those times.
Yeah, and that the second thing that kind of made me think of is, where is our focus? I love when David here, he talks about God as his fortress. And I think for us, there's kind of two ways we can go when it comes to our fortress. We can have a fortress of fear, or we can have a fortress of faith. And that all depends on my focus. So if I'm focused on me, if I'm focused on my inadequacies, on what I can't do, if I'm young or if I'm old, if I'm inexperienced, if I have too much experience like in this area, like where is my focus? If it's on me, I'm going to have a fortress of fear. But if it's on God, then I create a fortress of faith. Because in that time I'm thinking, okay, the Lord has done all these things for me. The Lord is the creator of the universe. The Lord, and so my focus is on Him, and because of that, I can build faith. And so David did that, and I think that's important for us in the waiting as well.
Yeah, man, I think that's so good, and I'm really glad that we got to sit down and talk through what it looks like to actually not just waste away our time of waiting, but actually weaponize it.
Yeah.